anything about the chair of Moses being passed on to anyone. In fact, I'd like to invite Mr. Butler to show us a single place where cathedra in the Greek is ever used of Peter at all. I'd like to see where this comes from. We were told that that is the case. Much has been made of Acts chapter 15. We were told that we were going to be demonstrated that one use of sagao and another use of sagao means this, that, and the other thing. We haven't heard any of that. But in Acts chapter 15, again, I would invite you to take the time to get out your Bible, read it, and see if Peter is a pope in Acts chapter 15. Don't start with the assumption that he is. Just read the scriptures and ask yourself the question, is the man speaking, starting at verse 7 through verse 11, the vicar of Christ on earth? Do the people hearing him see this man as the vicar of Christ on earth, the Holy Father, the one upon whom the church is built? Ask yourself if that passage teaches this. Peter speaks the truth. We are told that he got a revelation. Here he doesn't say that. He says, you know that in the early days God made a choice among you that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And he preaches the truth about the gospel, that the Gentiles are not to be brought under the necessity of circumcision. But then, after he speaks, is the issue over? Would you derive that from any honest reading of the text? Verse 12 says, and all the multitude kept silent, and they were listening to Barnabas and Saul as they were relating what signs and wonders God had done to them among the Gentiles. Paul, wait a minute. The vicar of Christ just spoke. You don't need to relate these signs and wonders. The case is settled. It's all over. We don't need this. Paul, you don't need to do that anymore. No. Paul confirms the truthfulness of what Peter has said. Peter is exactly right. But for some reason, Paul and Barnabas felt the need to get up, and the whole assembly fell silent as they listened to what they were saying. And when they then fell silent, that is Paul and Barnabas, James gets up, and I would like to point a few things out. A, I would like to ask my friends to show us anywhere else in Acts 15 where the speaker uses the imperative mode in the Greek, issues a command. James says, brethren, listen to me. Imperative. And then we were told that in when James gives his decision, and when he talks about my judgment in verse 19, well, that's my opinion. That's just my voice. You know, it doesn't mean anything more than just simply my voice. Verse 19 says, therefore it is my judgment that we do not trouble those who are turning to God from among the Gentiles. Ego krino, I judge. Is that used of opinions? Yeah, it is. Is it also used the very judgment of God by the same author? Yeah, it is. Read it for yourself and judge. And again, remember these things, folks. If in every single one of these verses I can give you a perfectly logical, consistent, and plausible alternate understanding, the Roman position fails. The Roman position is based upon this long line. Peter's the rock. Peter's given the keys. Nobody else is given the keys. This has something to do with Isaiah 22. That has something to do with the Bishop of Rome. Therefore, their successors. If you can challenge that line all the way along, think about what it means for Rome to say you are anathema if you reject this belief. Thank you very much.
My concluding remarks will be confined to rebutting what Mr. White has just said. In Galatians chapter 2, he asked, who was I to judge that Paul was just overreacting? That's exactly the point. In the context of Galatians 2, there is no divine judgment. God is not saying, Paul, you're correct, Peter, you are wrong. Nor, Paul, you are totally correct, and Peter, you are totally wrong. We must remember that this is written from Paul's disposition. Paul was really concerned about people circumcising Gentiles. But let me reiterate, that is not what Peter did. Peter just disfellowshipped himself from eating with Gentiles. That is not a major crime. That is not distorting or destroying the gospel. Circumcising Gentiles is destroying the gospel. He talks about the Aramaic. We don't need the Aramaic. I don't even use the Aramaic in my arguments. I use the Greek. I was very demonstrative in pointing out the demonstrative tauti te petra, this very rock. I don't know how much clearer it can be in Matthew 16. What else does Jesus have to say to us to get it through our heads? It is not the rock. It is not a rock. It is this rock I just talked about. Petros means rock. John 1:42, he changed his name from Simon to Rock, the Aramaic Kephas. How much more information do we need? He says that Peter speaks for all the apostles. Yes, on certain occasions. But in this occasion in Matthew 16, he doesn't speak for all the apostles. As a matter of fact, their information is wrong. They don't know who he is. They say, some say you're this, some say you're that. Nobody speaks up. Peter gets the revelation, as I said before, from God that this is the Son of God. He says that rock is the third person address. My friends, let me tell you again. There is no such thing as a third person address for a noun. Rock is a noun. It's Petra. Nouns do not have person address. They have declensions in Greek to signify what they represent in the context. His argument about Chris Karagunis' book, his own professor at Fuller Theological Seminary says any argument of the caliber of Chris Karagunis is just prejudice against the papacy of the Roman Catholic Church. And this is a Protestant scholar. He says Matthew 16:19 uses the word doso in the future. Well, of course. Peter will be sitting on the chair of Peter in the future. He will be restored from his fall and be the Pope. And he will continue throughout the centuries. It doesn't dilute the message that Jesus gave him. Remember, Jesus gave him the keys. He said, whatever you bind shall be bound. Listen to that. That's what he said to him. Don't get confused about future, perfect, and present in the Greek. That doesn't mean anything here. He will have it. If he doesn't have it now, he will have it in the future. He says that, yes, William Hendrickson talks about Peter as the rock. He admits it. Congratulations, Mr. Hendrickson, and you along with many other Protestant scholars. But he says, well, Mr. Hendrickson doesn't talk about succession. He doesn't believe in succession. I know, that's a Protestant problem. They took them 400 years to discover that Peter was the rock. I hope it doesn't take them another 400 years to discover the next truth, that there is succession. And we never said that Matthew 16 talked about succession. All I said was Matthew 16 said Peter was the rock. He was given the keys to bind and to loose. And Mr. White makes a big deal about the singular key and the plural keys. And he says, well, Jesus gave Peter the keys, plural, in Matthew 16, but it's singular in Isaiah 22, and it's singular with Jesus.